All right, folks, welcome back. How was that? Did you love it? Was it the best thing you've ever done? Yeah? Great.
No.
No? Not quite? Are you
So this is the
sure?
real, actually, this is the real, real estate, Obviously, the questions, the offer, people bidding, multiple offer receiving.
Conversation was good.
Yeah, there you go. I do like having those activities because it gives you an opportunity to kind of get to know each other a little bit more. And I wish I had more time to do more of those activities. But of course, there is just so much information that, we typically just have to keep boogieing along so we don't get behind. But hopefully, y'all had a good time in there, even though you didn't necessarily love the concept in any way, shape, and form. Let's see how you did. Because some of you are overly optimistic. Some of you may be a little surprised. Some of you may have your feelings hurt. But we're going to see no matter which way you slice it. And I'm going to make sure that you're all very comfortable with these in their entirety. So, number one. Todd Buyer makes an offer to purchase on a property through his agent. His agent delivers it to the listing agent, who promptly delivers it to the seller. The seller is excited about the offer and wants to accept it. He signs the offer, places a copy in the mail to his agent, and calls his agent to communicate his acceptance. His agent congratulates him for selling the property. Do we have a contract? What'd you come up with here? I got some yeses. I got some no's. See, some people are going to have their feelings hurt. Folks, the answer is no. No. Here's the way to approach these. I've already kind of taught it to you a little bit. You've got to think of it like this plane with the offer or and the offer E. Todd makes an offer to purchase a property through his agent. His agent delivers it to the listing agent. So it goes from the offer or side to the offeree side when the listing agent gets it. The listing agent delivers it to the seller, still on the offeree side. Seller's excited about the offer and wants to accept it. He signs the offer and places a copy in the mail to his agent, still on the offeree side, and calls his agent, still on the offeree side, to communicate his acceptance. It has to get back to the offeror or the offeror's agent, and they have not been communicated with. It is not a contract. Does that make sense? I told you, some of you aren't going to like it. But it better make sense, though, because it's on the offeree side, right? Don't get caught up just because it's like, oh, mailbox rule. No mailbox rule. Because it's not going to the offeror or the offeror's agent. It always has to go to the offeror or the offeror's agent. Who just had their hand up? Raphael, what you got?
No, you just clarify without me asking.
Yep, there you go. I'm pretty good at that.
In the mail, but not to the offerer.
There you go. It's got to be communicated to the offeror or the offeror's agent. That didn't happen here. We don't have a contract. Everybody with me? Let's see how number 2 goes. Susan is a listing agent and leaves her seller's house late on Friday night with an accepted offer, just signed by the seller. Knowing that it's too late to contact the buyer's agent, she decides to simply fax the accepted offer to the real estate company of the buyer's agent in the morning. The next morning, before Susan goes to her office to fax the offer, the buyer's agent calls Susan and notifies her that her buyer is revoking their offer because they have found another house. Can this buyer revoke their offer? A little more unanimous on this one. Every single one of you saying yes. The answer is yes, because it has not been communicated. Folks, it's been signed, but it has to be signed and communicated. What should Susan have done that night when she left her seller's house? Yeah. Well, listen, she needs to leave the fax machine in 1990 never. She should have emailed or texted or something and just let them know. Folks, nobody has ever been, well, apparently if it's late, you don't necessarily want to call, but nobody's ever been woken up by an email. Nobody. So she could have emailed it that night and been under contract even while they were asleep. Folks, understand that the second, if she would have emailed it that night, even if everybody is asleep, these things that are time-stamped count even if you haven't seen them. That's very important. So as soon as she would have hit send, it would have been a contract. Even if the other side was asleep, still would have been a contract. But as it were, that didn't happen. She didn't communicate it. Can they revoke their offer? Yes. How about 3? Luke Buyer has made an offer on a tract of land in Leland. He has not received a response from the seller in a few days and decides to pursue another piece of land in the area. He writes withdrawn on a copy of the offer, initials and dates the form, and places it in the mail directly to his agent. The next day, the seller decides to accept the offer. He signs it and places a copy in the mail directly to the buyer. Do we have a contract? Yes, we do. Folks, let's do it again. Luke Buyer has made an offer on a property in Leland. He has not received a response from the seller in a few days and decides to pursue another piece of land in the area. He writes withdrawn on a copy of the offer, initials and dates the form, and places it in the mail directly to his agent. First big issue is he communicated his revocation of his offer to his agent. Second big issue is even if he had sent it to the right place, the mailbox rule does not apply to revocation of offers. It only applies to communication of acceptance. If he had mailed the revocation, it wouldn't have been revoked until the seller actually saw the revocation. The mailbox rule only applies to communication of acceptance. That's it. What you got, Raphael?
What about the few days? It's not 1 or 2. It's actually more than 3 days.
And what did I tell you about that?
I think if you haven't heard anything, you just toss it out.
You have to kill it. Because if one party argues that it's been a reasonable period of time and another one argues that it hasn't, you're in court. So arguably a few days is a reasonable period of time subjectively. And so it's technically still alive.
So in order to avoid that, you have to contact the other party?
You'd have to revoke it the right way. He tried, but he failed miserably. He didn't actually revoke it. So it's alive.
What would be the proper way?
All he would have had to do was email him and say, hey, my offer is dead. That's it. Because then it would have been instantaneously communicated.
Okay.
Yeah. So as it were, that didn't happen. So the next day, the seller decides to accept the offer. He signs it and places a copy in the mail directly to the buyer. Now the mailbox rule does kick in because it is being mailed to the offeror or the offeror's agent. So we are under contract. He never actually revoked the offer, so it was alive and well. And when the seller signed it and communicated it back via the mailbox rule, they were under contract. Make sense?
So, yeah, that one was a little confusing to me because if one person sent their revocation directly via mail, and then the other person obviously is sending the acceptance via mail at a later date, wouldn't it be whoever receives what first, or it does not matter?
Who was the revocation mailed to, Beverly?
Oh, the agent. Yeah.
The offeror's agent, the buyer's agent. That doesn't do any good because the seller doesn't know that the offer was revoked, and so it's still alive to the seller. And then the other thing I told you, the mailbox rule specifically only applies to communication of acceptance. And so when the mailman picked it up, they were under contract. If you were mailing a revocation, you haven't actually revoked the offer until it's been delivered. It only has this special rule for communication of acceptance. So imagine that they mail them at the exact same time. They're still under contract because one would only be interpreted when it was received. The other was interpreted when it was sent.
I see.
Yeah. All right. Keeping this exciting. Let's see how we did on the next one. Lucy Smith is working with a first-time buyer. They found a perfect home in Wilmington with a great offering price. Lucy presents an offer on the property to the listing agent who returns it requesting a larger amount of earnest money deposit. Lucy delivers the offer to her buyer who wants a few days to decide. A few days later, the buyer notifies Lucy that she has accepted the counteroffer and will drop off a copy on Monday. She fails to tell Lucy that she added a few days to the closing date since we have been negotiating for a week or so. Lucy calls the listing agent and communicates acceptance of the offer. Do we have a contract? The answer is no. Folks, you have to have a meeting of the minds. Mutual agreement. A date was changed, which means not everybody was in agreement. That is a counteroffer, which means the offer was killed. You cannot change things unilaterally. Signed with no changes and communicate that acceptance to the offeror or the offeror's agent. What you got, Jack?
We spent some time on this one, and I felt like what we came down to is when Lucy goes to sign that counteroffer, even though the date has changed, she still read the entire thing and signed it.
But who hasn't been notified of the day change? Jack, you send me an offer and you say you want to close on December 20th. And I sign it, but I change the date to March 25th. Are you okay with that?
If I read it and signed it?
No, you didn't. You signed it when it said the 20th of December.
Oh.
And then I signed it and I changed it.
Okay.
You haven't seen it.
Misread the order of operations.
You see what's happening here? So Lucy delivers the counter. So of course we got this first counter offer, right? But Lucy delivers the offer to her buyer who wants a few days to decide on this counter offer, which killed the first one. A few days later, she notifies her that she's accepted this counter offer, but she doesn't tell her that she changed the dates. And so that means that the seller has not seen this date change. Lucy signed it, but she changed terms. And what really happens here, folks, aside from this not being a contract, it being a counteroffer, when Lucy calls a listing agent and communicates acceptance, she's just committed a negligent misrepresentation because she's stating they're under contract when they're not. Because as a licensee, she should have verified that no changes had been made before she stated that's factual, we're under contract. You have to remember that any change, it could be a day, a dollar, doesn't matter. If somebody changes it, then it's dead. And the other person is now going to be switching roles. Has to go back to the other person so they can decide if they want to accept that change or not. Is this how dirty the test is going to be? No, but you've got to pay attention to these scenarios. Because one detail changes everything, not even for these, the entirety of your pre-licensing test. One detail changes the entirety of the question. What you got, Brooks?
So I'm sorry. Sometimes my brain fries. So the seller changing the date of closing is sufficient because both parties didn't agree to it. In the real world, isn't a closing date can't that be pushed or?
It can only be pushed. You gotta interpret these contracts quite literally. When we send an offer that becomes a contract, there is a closing date on it, and that is our legal closing date. And if and only if all parties agree to change it, can it change. However, you will find that we will have discussions later. Certain contracts do have a grace period built in, but that's not the same thing as you changing it in this offer land, right? Because a contract already being formed and the contract having a grace period built in is one thing. But you have to have a meeting of the minds for this to become a contract, and there is not one here. That make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. So also that brings back into the willful, negligent, and all the misrepresentations.
Mm-hmm.
With are agents held to a higher standard than the average bear?
Mm-hmm.
So what? Let's just talk this out. Maybe a rabbit hole. Tell me to hush. Is this grounds for a licensee to lose their license?
Lose it? Probably not. Be disciplined, reprimanded, censured, something like that. Suspended? Yes. True story, Brooks. Folks, just so I can put this in perspective for you. This actually happened last year. It was a real disciplinary action at the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. The buyer sent an offer over on behalf of their buyer client. Listing agent sent it to the seller. The seller signed it, but the seller had changed the due diligence date. The buyers had asked for like a 6-week due diligence period and a delayed closing, and the sellers changed it to a 1-week due diligence period. But they signed it, didn't tell their agent, told their agent they accepted the offer. The agent told the buyer's agent that they accepted the offer. The buyer's agent told the buyers they accepted the offer. And it was not until a copy was given to the buyers that the buyers realized that change was made. And they picked up the phone, they called their agent, they said, we're not under contract. They changed the due diligence date. So they canceled the due diligence check. They canceled the earnest money. Sellers got pissed off because the checks were canceled. And I don't know who made the phone call, but both agents were reported to the Real Estate Commission for negligence because neither caught the fact that this was changed. Seller thought they were entitled to the money. Buyer thought there was no contract. And of course, people started trying to sue each other. Both licensees were in trouble. Both had reprimands on their records. Really can happen. We do not have a meeting of the minds if somebody has changed terms and the other party hasn't acknowledged it, accepted it, and communicated it. Okay? It doesn't matter if it's a $1 change, a $1 change, any change is a counteroffer that kills the original, and we don't have a contract. So that's what happened here. We had double counteroffers, no contract is formed, and a negligent misrepresentation because the agent said they were under contract when they were not. Oh. Playing this game in my head of like, I'm guessing how many of y'all are going to drink tonight versus how many of y'all are not, right? So, yeah, Tara, Anthony already admitted it. Yes, I know you. Okay, listen, Anthony, I know. You already done said it. Okay, I get it. You have my permission. Wants to start. Might make it a little harder to understand, okay? Maybe wait a minute, right? So you don't lose any of this. Questionable. How about number 5 here? Seller Ryan Jones receives an offer on his property located in Hampstead. He likes everything except the price, so he changes the price, signs the offer, and sends it back to the buyer through his agent. After several days, Ryan receives a call from his listing agent. He is bringing him a full price offer with no contingencies. Since Ryan has not heard back from the first buyer, he quickly signs and accepts the new offer, and his agent communicates this to the buyer. Do we have a contract? Janet, why you always gotta yell at me? It's always all caps, girl.
Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, we're under contract. Who are we under contract with?
The new offer.
The new offer. And what do we need to do? Thank God we got that one right. There you go, Jack. Thank you, Jesus. What do we need to do, folks? Think about it. Terminate the counteroffer on the first buyers. Folks, that counteroffer is alive and well still because they received that offer, they countered it, which means that the seller was the offer or that other buyer was the offeree. If they've accepted this when they're now under contract, imagine what happens if they don't terminate that counteroffer. What's to say that the other buyers don't sign it and accept it as written and communicate it? Now they're under contract twice. Folks, being under contract twice is a bad day. So they need to revoke that counteroffer. Everybody with me? What you got, Raphael?
Yeah, that was one of the questions we had when we were dealing with that. How do we revoke then?
You just send an email. Hey, it's dead. No mas. That's it.
Email.
That's it. You just have to communicate them. Hey, that offer I sent you, it's no longer on the table. You just got to make them aware of it. And it's dead. Just like that.
Phone call do?
Yeah. But I mean, in real estate land, you want everything in writing to cover your tookuses, but a phone call in theory would do. It just makes me nervous. Brooke says, but not mail. Yeah, because the thing is, it has to actually be like, they have to be made aware of it. And so that's why we say don't mail, because they wouldn't be made aware of it until it actually got delivered there. So an email, a text message, a phone call, all of these would be acceptable for killing an offer. If you snail mail it, I mean, I'm not going to say it's not going to work. It's just not going to work until it actually gets opened and looked at. And there's no way to prove that. There is no special rule for that, right? Yeah. Just a couple more here. Hopefully you're feeling a little bit more warm and fuzzy about these. 6, a listing agent receives an offer by email without any other communication from the buyer's agent. He sends it to his seller, who in turn signs it and faxes it back to him. The listing agent then faxes it back to the buyer's agent without any other communication. Do we have a contract? Okay, let me play devil's advocate just to pick on some of you who gave me, some different answers here. If the listing agent received this offer from the buyer's agent, that means the buyer's side is the offeror, the seller's side is the offeree. It is signed, and then the buyer's agent is made aware that it has been signed. So has this acceptance been communicated to the offeror or the offeror's agent? Yeah. There doesn't need to be any formality of congratulations, we've accepted your offer, we look forward to working with you. Do we typically do that hoopla? Yeah, sure. But folks, the offeror's agent is aware that it's been signed with no changes. It's a contract. Let me put in perspective for you another way. With Dotloop, DigiSign, DocuSign, all these digital programs that exist nowadays, if I was the buyer's agent, but for some reason I had the seller's email as well, and I typed up an offer on behalf of my buyers in Dotloop, and I sent it via Dotloop to both the buyers and the sellers, and the buyers sign it, and when they sign it, the sellers get a notification email that the buyer signed it, and then the sellers sign it, and the buyers get a notification email that the seller signed it, we're under contract. Right then and there. There doesn't even need to be emails. It's just that email notified them that it was signed. And we're under contract. There does not need to be formal communications. There does not need to be congratulations. There does not need to be any of that. If it's been signed with no changes and communicated in any way, shape, or form to the offeror or the offeror's agent, it's a contract. Everybody with me? And if you're struggling with it, let me know. Because I can explain it about 10 million different ways. And if you don't tell me where you're struggling, I can't help you. But I can see the exasperation on some faces. Yeah. And by exasperation, I mean you just upped it to like the whole bottle of wine instead of 2 glasses of wine. Yeah, that's what we mean, right? It's just it got up. You know, just toss it back. Don't even bother getting a glass. All right. How about 7? Buyer Becca makes an offer on a listed house listed for sale. Seller wants to accept the offer, but lives out of the area and does not have immediate access to a fax machine or computer. He tells his agent that he will sign it as soon as possible, but to go ahead and inform the buyer that he has accepted the offer. Later that day, the listing agent informs the seller that they have received another better offer. Can the seller accept the new offer, or do they already have a contract? Can't accept, yeah. Yes, yeah, can't accept. Yeah, everybody saying they can? Sure they can. Folks, let's clarify this though, okay? It has to be signed and communicated, and there is no signature. If this agent would have listened to the instructions of this seller and communicated this acceptance and said, hey, they've accepted your offer, they just, once again, committed a misrepresentation because no, they haven't. When we're communicating acceptance, it means that it's actually been signed. Because I want you to think about this from a real world point of view. If the seller tells you to go ahead and tell somebody they've accepted it, and you do that, and these other buyers think that they're under contract with you, and then a better offer comes in and you tell the seller about this better offer, do you think any seller in their right mind is going to sign the crappier offer because you tell them they legally have to? No. They're going to say, well, I'm not going to take that one. I want the better one. And now you've got to admit to the other party you've committed the misrepresentation because you stated they were under contract and there is no signatures. So we don't ever communicate acceptance unless we actually have acceptance. Signed with no changes and then communicated to the offeror and offeror's agent. Everybody with me?
So the answer was no.
Can the seller accept the new offer? Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Because hopefully the agent did not listen to these instructions because they weren't under contract. It has to be signed and communicated. Both are equally important. You can't have one or the other. Signed and communication of that acceptance to the offeror or the offeror's agent. Last one. Derek, a listing agent, calls Kate, the buyer's agent, to communicate the acceptance of the buyer's offer. But the conversation goes like this. Hi, Kate, it's Derek. Hi, Derek, I'm so glad you called. The buyer wants to withdraw their offer on your seller's house because they found one that they like better. Derek says, well, I'm sorry to hear that, Kate, because I'm calling to inform you that the seller has already accepted your buyer's offer. I hope they can decide they'll be happy here. I'll bring you a copy of the accepted offer in a little while. Is there a contract between this buyer and seller? No. Folks, hi, Kate, it's Derek. Hi, Derek, I'm so glad you called. The buyer wants to withdraw their offer. Right then and there, the buyer's agent just revoked the buyer's offer prior to communication of acceptance. It quite literally comes down to the wild, wild west of real estate. Who said it first? What you got, Ashley?
So if this was like a vice versa conversation, so like if they were to be like, hey, I wanted to tell you that like the seller accepted the offer, and then they were going to be like, oh, we're actually calling because they withdrew their offer. would it then be a contract because the first person who said like, hey, this is an accepted offer?
Yep. That's exactly what it would have been. But here's the thing, folks. Let's not get into semantics because you have to understand that this is a phone conversation. So if they're not in agreement, it will literally come down in court on whether or not we had a contract to he said versus she said. Is that going to be an easy court hearing to win? No. Should we all just let bygones be bygones and go our separate ways as opposed to having to fight in court? Yes. But legally speaking, so you understand basic contract law, it's whoever said it first. And I know that may bother some of you because some of you are probably thinking, but he's the one that called her. It doesn't matter. Maybe he was calling to ask her out on a date. You don't know. Okay? It's possible. Listen, prove in court that wasn't why he was calling. You have no idea why this man was calling her. Yeah, we can assume what it was for, but you can't just go off, well, he dialed the number. It doesn't matter. Who said it first? What you got, Janet?
Okay, so it doesn't matter if it's not date or signed any documentations?
No, it's the communication. It does have to be signed and dated, but when I'm telling you we're communicating it, we're just telling you that that's happened. That's all that has to happen. That's why it can just be a phone call. All Derek is telling her is that it has been signed. And that communication is what makes it a contract, even though Kate hadn't seen the contract. Now, of course, she said it first, but I'm telling you, if Derek had just said, hey, Kate, I'm calling to let you know my sellers accepted your offer. It's a contract. They don't have to see it. Because coming from a real estate professional, we have to know what that actually means. It's been signed. Does that make sense? Will we ultimately need a copy of it? Yes, but that is not conditioned on it being a contract. So signed is a piece. Communicated is a separate piece. The communication is telling us it's signed. Folks, let me give you a real world scenario and then I'm going to send you on break, okay? Here's the short version. Several years back, I listed a house in Raleigh. It was a bungalow, a really cute house. Here's the point of the story. I listed it on the weekend that I was going out of town for a friend's wedding. I was going to be 3 hours away and I was probably going to be smammered the entire time. And so I got an offer the day that I was leaving for the wedding and it was an acceptable offer. And I had my sellers sign it. They said, we would accept this. So I had them sign it the day that we got that offer, before I got in the car to drive out of town. And there was another offer potentially coming in. And so the thought was, this one's already signed. In case another one doesn't come in, I will communicate the acceptance. But if the other one comes in, I won't communicate it and we'll move that one. So it was signed. I go to wherever this wedding was, check into the bed and breakfast, all that fun-filled jazz. Gets to be 7 o'clock. We never got an offer from the other agent. I text my sellers and I said, hey, do you want me to communicate the acceptance, on this first buyer? Because I never got an offer from the other people. They said, yep, go ahead. It had been signed for like 5 hours at this point. But because they gave me the okay now, I texted these buyers and I said, congratulations, we're under contract. That second that I sent that text, that's when we were under contract. Because I was communicating that it had been signed. Signatures alone are not enough. It'd been signed for 5 hours. Nobody knew it though. And so that text, that communication, that's the trigger. I was at the time. Here's the kicker to that point, to this story, Brooks. That agent did not get a copy of that contract until noon the next day when my hangover was gone. Okay? Because I texted him, went out drinking, and didn't send him a copy until the next day. But we'd been under contract the entire time because I communicated it. Everybody with me? That's how this works. Folks, hopefully that was a very informative and enlightening activity. There are, as I stated, going to be several questions like that on the test where they are going to give you scenarios and you've got to be able to pinpoint when it became a contract, if it became a contract, and things of that nature. And so just make sure that you kind of understand it. And, if you have questions, make sure you ask them. Don't ever be afraid to ask questions, folks. Real estate class, you figure this out. It's not easy. It is such quirky aspects to all the information. And there's so many like, if this, then that. So please don't ever be discouraged. Please don't ever be afraid to ask questions because it's okay to be confused. It's normal. It's difficult stuff. But, we can go over it and review things and talk about it and make sure y'all are comfortable. So